as I said this morning, I was here a few years ago, and then I kind of refreshed my memory by looking at the website, and I saw this building coming out of the prairie or whatever you have around here. It's like, what? Where did that come from? It's really beautiful. Thank God for what He's provided for you and how you've worked at that. It's great. Really like your facility and with the leaders and enjoyed them and their heart for you and their heart for the vision and the community and the world and to see where God wants to take us. So I'm excited about being here and really happy to be here. And I'm also excited about this topic tonight because I've had plenty of stress. And I hope this helps me tonight because I really need it. No, well, I have to use it. Okay, I want to give you a little explanation of where we're going tonight. We're going to have a lot of scriptures involved here, but we're also going to, this is going to be heavy on application. So there'll be some things that are just practical application. And you can say, where's that in the Bible? Well, it's not against the Bible or anything like that, but there are natural and spiritual things that we can do to deal with stress. And we've all experienced it. Tonight I want to do a couple of things for you. I'd like you to be able to go away from here with a real clear understanding of what stress is, because the better you understand it, the better you'll be able to deal with it and manage it well. And everybody has stress, and you'll see that. I mean, you know that already, but you'll see how that works. But then not only do I want to give you an understanding kind of how stress works, but then what you can do about it to manage it really well. Let me give you a couple tools that I think will help you in your battle with stress. And a lot of this actually grew out of a lot of research that I did. And as Abe was talking about, ended up going into businesses, and it's a popular topic. So let me tell you a little story to start with. In May, as I said this morning, I was in Zambia, and I lost my wallet. I was going from Zambia to Uganda, and I got at the airport in Lusaka, Zambia. They have all these fun names, Zambia, Uganda, Lusaka, and all that. So in Lusaka, everybody said Lusaka. It's kind of a fun name. There is we went to the airport, I went to the airport, and I took my wallet out, and I exchanged some money because they have really funny money there, and I thought my grandkids would like some of their colorful funny money with funny pictures on it and stuff. And that's the last I remember seeing my wallet. So I got on the airplane, we flew to Zimbabwe, and at the capital, Harare, in Zimbabwe, another fun name, I thought, well, you know, maybe I'll use the restroom while we're stopped here in the airplane. I couldn't get off the plane. And I thought, I'll take my wallet with me and look for my wallet, and I could not find my wallet. It had 3 credit cards in it, a debit card, my driver's license, and $220. Now, fortunately, I could find my passport. So the first thing I did, being the stress meister, is I freaked out. I said, oh no, I mean literally, I went, I can't believe this. I have lost my wallet. And I'm going to spend 8 days in Uganda without a credit card, and I thought, well, at least I have. So after I freaked out a little bit, I calmed myself down with some of the things that I learned, and okay, I thought, I'm the stress meister here, I got to be able to handle this. But so we called back to Lusaka with the airline, they helped me with this, and tried to find it, and there was actually, in the next day or two, there was a guy that worked for the airlines and actually retraced my steps through the airport, and nobody ever found it. So I had some friends in Uganda that had credit cards, thank God. And they're actually from the Winnipeg church, they were there, they helped me. And I had $300 in a backpack, and I made it through. But it was extremely stressful. During that time of being stressed out, I kept thinking, what can I do? And I learned that in stress, sometimes you feel overwhelmed and powerless. And one of the things that I did is I used this, I started thinking, I can do something about this. So I called my wife. My phone wasn't on, I couldn't get my reception there, so I asked in the airplane, hey, does anybody in this airplane have a phone that I could use to call the States? And the guy said, oh, sure, use mine. And I told him I lost my wallet. So I called my wife, 4 o'clock in the morning, hello? Yeah, I lost my wallet. Had all my credit cards in it. You had all your credit cards in one place? I said, honey, we'll talk about it later. Let's just resolve this. So she started canceling the credit cards and debit cards and all that. So I was out $220. What happened was, in Africa, when they steal stuff like that, they don't want the credit cards, because if it gets caught with those, they're really in big trouble. So they just take the money and throw the thing away. So I called the credit card companies. They said nobody ever tried to use those. That was very stressful. Also, while I was in Zambia, I heard from my brother that my 85-year-old mother broke her hip. She fell in her apartment, and we'll talk about her more tonight because she's a great example of stress, and in a good way. And so, well, in a bad way too. Anyway, so I thought, most people after they go through something like that, at 85 you break your hip. A lot of people die, frankly, afterwards. She's doing better now than she was before she broke her hip. I would not recommend breaking your hip, but for her, it worked. So we're going to go with that, all right? So we go through stress, and God's Word gives us help on what happens when we're stressed. Psalm 94:19 is one of my favorite scriptures when I'm feeling anxious or worried or whatever it might be. In 94:19 it says, when anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought joy to my soul. Or I like this one in the Message Bible. When I was upset and beside myself, you calmed me down and cheered me up. That's what I needed in that airplane in Zimbabwe, is I needed somebody to calm me down and cheer me up and say it's going to be okay. And, after it was all over, yeah, it was out $220, but we made it. We survived. And it helped me not to freak out. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and of a sound mind. And stress really works on our minds. So how do we work with God to overcome fear and anxiety and worry and those kind of things and really have a sound mind? We are in a battle with stress. Let me show you what's happening in the United States. The leading causes of death in our culture have shifted in the last century. Look at this slide. In the early 1900s, most people were dying of pneumonia, flu, and tuberculosis. What causes those diseases? Tell me. What causes those diseases? Germs, right? Okay, what about the next list? In 2010, the leading cause of death in the United States were heart disease, cancer, respiratory disease, strokes, accidents, Alzheimer's, and diabetes. Now, I look at that list and I say, well, cancer, but what they're actually saying is almost all, if not all of those in 2010 are either caused by stress or made worse by stress. Stress is killing us. Stress is killing us. And so we're in a situation where... All right, I won't. Stress is killing us. It's taking a huge toll. It affects not only the length of our lives, but the quality of life and how we're doing on our jobs and things like that. So here's the kicker, though. You can do more about stress than you can about infectious diseases. You have more control over stress, literally, you really do, than you do over infectious diseases. So we're going to learn about that tonight. So the answer to stress is resilience. Resilience is the answer to stress. And that's what, you may have been hearing about resilience in the news. There's a lot of discussion about resilience. But here's my definition of resilience. Resilience is the ability to adapt and thrive. Where's our worship leader? I think you have a gift of the Spirit. That song that you first led about thrive was the very one I often do in my seminars. And we'll get to the scripture too about that. But resilience is the ability to adapt. On an airplane in Zimbabwe when you lost your wallet, and thrive in the midst of stress and adversity. That does not come easily, and it doesn't happen right away. I freak out first, and then I thrive, and then I adapt, and then I adjust and do these kind of things. So resilience is thriving under stress. We grow and we develop and we prosper and flourish and all those things that have to do with thriving. Jeremiah 17, God paints a picture of what it means to thrive and what it means to be in stress at the same time. This is resilience. This is scripture that's in the song, actually. It refers to this. Blessed is the one, Jeremiah 17, 7-8. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. Heat's stress, right? Heat is stress. The tree gets stressed by heat. It doesn't fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. So this is saying, if we can learn how to trust God and work with Him in our stress, when the stress of heat and drought come, we don't have to fear and worry. And that comes from trusting God. Let me explain this dynamic, and it's pretty obvious, I think, in this verse what's going on here. If you can trust God, you won't have fear and worry. But if you do have a struggle with fear and worry, it's really hard to trust God. I'd like to trust God, but right now I'm scared, I'm anxious, I'm concerned, I don't know where this is going to end up. And I have all these worries about what's going on and what it means and what it's going to cost us. So the game changer is trusting God, but on the other hand, if we learn to deal with anxiety and worry, we're going to go a long way in learning how to overcome stress and manage it well. So that's what God has for us to do, and that's what we're going to focus on tonight. So how can we overcome fear and worry? Now, I want to look at what I call a scientific definition of the of stress. We'll get the brain. So I did this research for my master's thesis, actually on resilience and stress. And it was fascinating because it all came down to the way God created us. And it is incredible. You're going to learn about some really cool things, but here's one tonight. Stress is the brain's reaction to a perceived threat. That's my scientific definition of stress. You have the stress is the brain's reaction to a perceived threat. Every word there is really important. The first thing is threat. If there's no threat, there is no stress, right? If there's no threat. So here we go. You're walking through the woods. We have woods behind our house. And you're walking through the woods with your three buddies. Let's say you're in Tennessee, because there they have really mean snakes. And you look up the path, and there's a great big humongous snake, all right? And there are three of you, and each one responds differently. The first one says, we're all gonna die, freaks out, right? That may or be you, but there are names and faces coming to mind. And during this explanation, please don't poke the person next to you, all right? Or give them dirty looks like, oh yeah, you. Okay. So the first person is freaking out and saying, there's a threat. We're all going to die. What's the second person do? The second person is, okay, hold steady, everybody be calm, and just back off, and we'll be okay. Nobody's going to die. What's the third person say? You know that goofy guy or gal says, this is the best day of my life. We're going to catch a poisonous snake and take it home. Is that third person threatened? There's no threat there. Okay, now get with this. They've each experienced the same thing. But the stress level is totally different. For the first person, stress, 105 out of 100. For the second person, okay, we can manage this. Maybe about a 40% stress level. For the third person, no stress, just an exciting challenge. They used to do these stress tests years ago. I remember growing up with this. I remember 20, 30 years ago, they'd give you the stress test. You know what it was? It was a list of different things that could happen to you. So if you had a financial reversal, if you had a health problem, if you had a divorce, if you had a death of a loved one, they'd give you about 25 of these things. If you had to move from a different to move houses, and to move schools, ride a school bus to school, nobody should have to ride. I'm getting off track now. But anyway, so they'd add these all up, and then they'd say, oh, but if you had a death and a financial reversal and you lost your job, and these are your top 5 stressors, you are under huge stress. You know what they found out wasn't true? Because there's 3 people walking through the woods, and they all experience it differently. And that's the way stress is. It's not what we experience. It's that big fat word, the second to the last word up there, the way we perceive it, the way we think about it. And then we come up upon something, we perceive it's a threat, and then our brain goes into action in this beautiful way that God creates us, and we begin to react to it. So everybody reacts to it differently, okay? But there's a threat. Without threat, there's no stress, and how we think about the threat determines what it's going to, how we're going to experience that, and how stressed out we're going to be. So fear is how we feel about a threat. Worry is how we think about it. We're going to talk about those two things tonight, fear and worry. I'm a little worried about it, but I'm not too afraid. All right? So here we go. So when we see a threat, a snake, a health problem, a financial thing going on, we feel afraid and worry fills our minds. So we're going to deal, first of all, with fear, and then we're going to talk about worry. Think about a recent stress that you had. What were you stressed out about? What was the threat? What was being threatened? If in order for it to be stressful, something is always going to be threatened. There's the possibility of losing something, or something bad is going to happen. There's a threat, foreboding, you know. So, what was the threat, and how did you think about that, and how did you react to it? Did you react in fear? Did you react in worry? What does the Bible say about how, if fear and worry are the ways that we respond to a threat, what does the Bible say? Psalm 131 verse 2 says, "But I have calmed and quieted my soul." Can you do that? When you see a snake, when you lose your wallet, when you've had a financial reversal, when you've had a really terrible thing happening to you, can you calm yourself? No. I'm not sure exactly how David did this in Psalm 131 verse 2, where he says, he said he did it. And you know, it's interesting, he doesn't really even say God did it. Now, I'm sure God helped him. But he said, "I have calmed and quieted my soul." I want to help you with that tonight and show you how we can do that. Okay, let's talk about fear. What is the most important commandment in the Bible? Help me out. Pardon? What? Love your Lord your God. Jesus said, they came to him and said, "What's the most important commandment?" And Jesus said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself." What's the most frequent one? Well, I'm kind of leading you on here. The most frequent command in the Bible is not to fear. You know how many times God told us not to fear? Over 200 times in the Bible, God said, "Don't be afraid." Sometimes he did it because he showed up in such fearful ways, everybody's freaking out. It's like, "Oh, don't be afraid, it's me." It's like, "Okay, God, just don't scare me that way." But in Matthew 22, 36 to 37 to 39, love the Lord your God. But in Isaiah 41:10, "So do not fear, I am with you. Do not be dismayed, I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Evidently, it's really important to God that we learn to overcome fear and anxiety. It's really big to God. He said it over 200 times. Why is it important? Because fear is common. Fear disables us. Fear keeps us from the first command, often loving God. And fear keeps us from trusting God and thriving and really being resilient. So God wants to calm our fears. And in Psalm 23:4 it says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me." God wants to reveal himself to us in that way. And we already read Psalm 94:19, "When I was upset beside myself, you calmed me down and cheered me up." But sometimes these verses seem to mock us. We read them over and over again, and we walk away scared. So is there something we can do to calm our souls? Let's go back to this definition of stress. Stress is the brain's reaction to a perceived threat. Let's go to that next slide and see if there's a lovely picture. Oh, there is a lovely picture on there. Okay. When we experience a stressful event, we go into the stress response. The stress response is fight, flight, or freeze. This message is brought to you by the letter F. Okay, so here's what happens. We go into this Sesame Street people here? Okay, so here's what happens. We go into and this is the way God created us. So, when there was a saber-toothed tiger, I don't know if you have them around here in Manitoba, but when you have a saber-toothed tiger all of a sudden coming up on the scene, what happens? Okay, when you're stressed, can I solicit some more responses here? What happens to your body when you're stressed or fearful or something comes up like that and scares you? Your heart rate goes up. You breathe faster, more shallow. Your blood pressure goes up. Your muscles tense. All these things start happening, and the adrenaline's pumping into your system, and it happens in a split second. A bee comes toward your face, and wham, you get it out of the way. And this is called the autonomic nervous system. It happens without you even thinking. That bee comes flying toward your face, you whap it out of the way, and then you say, what was that? And it was like, it wasn't like, gee, a bee is coming toward my face. I think I'll just take care of this. No, your body, God made us in such an amazing way. You drive down the road and somebody pulls in front of you and you hit the brake and you turn out of the way and you think, what was that? And you try to process it afterwards. Because your body is made in this amazing way that you can fight, you can take flight, or sometimes even freeze when you're in a situation. Sometimes that's really appropriate. Sometimes it's not. Okay? And it gets really ugly in the office or at work or in the home when everybody's freaking out and doing the fight, flight, freeze routine. Okay? And so we have to figure out, okay, what is going on here that happens in our body? Here's a really big thing that will help you to understand why it's so important to calm our stress. When we are in the stress response, there are parts of our brain that are working fantastically fast, the automatic parts, but there are parts that are not working fast at all. In fact, they slow down or stop working. You know what they are? They are the creative, problem-solving, learning part of your brain. Did you ever sit down at a computer and somebody's looking over your shoulder and they're trying to tell you how to do that computer? And now you're really stressed out because they're looking over your shoulder and telling you what to do, and you're thinking, I gotta get this right. And would they just leave me alone and I can figure it out? Because your brain has just gone cold. You can do fight, flight, freeze really good at that time, but you can't do Windows 10 or whatever it is, you know? And so how do you do this? And so what happens is God made us this way to where we get into the stress response and the learning, creative, problem-solving part of our brain turns on, and then it gets really bad. It goes worse still. When you get in that response, it can last up to 3 hours. Did you ever have that? Did you ever come home from work and you couldn't come home from work? You're physically home, but you can't slow down. And you go to bed, your brain's still going. You know why? Because you're in the stress response. You're still going. And it can go up to 3 hours. And you can't sleep, and you can't relax, and you can't have a nice chat with your wife or your husband, and they talk to you, and it ain't going well, all right? So we got to deal with this thing. But I've calmed and quieted my soul. How do I do that? So we have to learn how to turn this thing off. Now, let me tell you a story that turns out well, but doesn't start well at all. My daughter Roseanne, we have 3 daughters, and the youngest Roseanne, several years ago, called me, and I was, Thursday morning, I'll never forget this, I was home sitting in my chair preparing a talk, and Roseanne called me, and she said, Dad, I just ran over Gavin. Now remember, this story turns out all right. Gavin was her 19-year-old son, 19-month-old son, that our grandchild, and then she said, Dad, I just ran over Gavin, and the phone went dead. So, I had no idea whether he was alive or dead. I grabbed my phone, it was one of the old cell phones that you couldn't talk to, it was several years ago, and I threw my shoes on, and I jumped in the car. Normally it takes 7 minutes to get to her house. I got there at about 3. I was going 85 miles an hour, passing cars, dialing my phone, and about halfway there, I finally got her, and I said, is he alive? Yes, but she said, she started explaining his injuries. I come flying into the driveway, I beat the ambulance there, and I crash into a tree in front of her. It didn't really hurt the car, but she was looking up and said, Dad! And it's like, I've just added to all of her anxiety. I am fully in the stress response, all right? Now, to finish the story, what happened was, Roseanne was leaving the house, and there was, she was getting ready to leave, and the dog followed her out their long driveway. And so she backed up, and that was fine, and she gave the dog to the babysitter. But then when she started pulling away, what nobody knew is that Gavin had come up to the back side of the car and gone around to the blind side of her car, and he always had this fascination with cars. And when she took off, she said, Dad, it was like a huge speed bump. And I knew it was Gavin, and I knew he was gone. But he wasn't gone. So they took him by helicopter to one hospital, and then they took him by helicopter down to Indianapolis, 3 hours away by car. And they took him down there, and 5 days later he came home, and they said at Riley Children's Hospital, this is the first child they ever had. Brace yourself for this. First child they ever had that was run over on his head and survived on a hard gravel driveway. It was a miracle. We don't know how to. He had a skull fracture in the back of his head, the front of his head, and he has a little bit of a hearing problem left over. And when he came home 5 days later, he walked up to a car and started playing with the tire. And it's like, kid, you never learn. Okay, so I tell you that emotional story because I should have calmed myself. I jeopardized other people's lives and my own going to the airport. I went to the airport. It's like I was flying. Driving down the road, feeling I got to get there, I got to get there. And I wasn't doing very good problem solving, and I was dialing my phone, and then I crashed into the tree and had the Roseanne stress. So what do you do in a situation like that? Well, Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor and a psychiatrist, and he learned this from being in the Holocaust and surviving it. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. But you said, Steve, that the autonomic nervous system turns on, and there's nothing you can do. It just, bam, goes like that. Okay, you do the autonomic nervous system thing, okay? You're fully in your stress response in that instant. But then, before I left my chair, or as I left my chair after Roseanne's call, I should have taken a choice. I made a choice at that point. Okay, I'm fully in the stress response. What am I going to do about it right now? What am I going to do? And so we need to choose some kind of response that's going to calm us down. Another guy, Dr. Edmund Jacobson, said that we need to choose the relaxation response. Look at this frog chilling. An anxious mind cannot exist in a relaxed body. An anxious mind cannot exist in a relaxed body. If you can relax your body, you can relax your mind. If you can relax your mind, you can relax your body. So what I should have done is I should have breathed. I should have breathed. What are you thinking? Well, you were breathing, but it was kind of weird. That's true, but there's a way to do this. Deep breathing is the best and quickest way to calm our anxiety and turn off the stress response. Now, here's a really neat thing, the way God made us, all right? God made us in such a way that when your stress response kicks in, you breathe short and shallow. You know what happens that way? At the top of your lungs are nerves that make you more anxious and make you more, I shouldn't say anxious, but get you more energized, all right? At the bottom of your lungs is this wonderful friend of mine, my new friend. Meet my new friend. Not that picture. This, the vagus nerve. I don't usually put my picture of me up there, but this was on a slide. It's a long story. I didn't mean to have my picture up there. The vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is my new friend. You know what the vagus nerve is? It goes from your brain down all the way through your abdomen to the bottom part of your lungs. And when you stop breathing shallow and you start breathing deeply, it stimulates the vagus nerve. Everybody say vagus nerve. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. It's not that Vegas, all right? It's a different Vegas. So this is a vagus nerve, and what it does, you stimulate that vagus nerve when you breathe deeply. You ever see athletes do that? Step up to the foul line, take a deep breath before they. And a lot of people give it. Why does that work? It works because there's science to it. And it's amazing the way God made us. When you stimulate that vagus nerve, you release a concoction of chemicals in your body that is like a natural tranquilizer. It's like, hey, just a moment, I got to take a hit of drugs here. You know? And I like that. It's my new friend. You can turn off that 3-hour-long stress response in a few minutes by simply doing deep breathing. Because like I say, seriously, it releases a tranquilizer that relaxes your body. You have trouble sleeping at night? Do deep breathing before you go to sleep. I was telling my brother-in-law about this, and he's an ambulance driver. He said, oh yeah, oh yeah. He said, we go up in an accident scene after we stop the bleeding and all, here are these people, and they're in shock, and they're breathing shallow, and they're in the stress response. And he says, what we do is we put that oxygen probe on the finger, you know? That should be about 99, 97%. It's down to 87%. That's serious. They don't have any oxygen in their blood. So what he does is he said, once he gets them kind of stabilized, and he looks at him and he says, okay, look at me. Breathe with me. And they start breathing right there in the accident scene. And that blood, the oxygen, blood sensor, that oxygen sensor starts going up 87, 89, 90, 91, 92, and they start relaxing, and their body starts coming out of shock, out of their stress response, and finding ways to, it is on the path toward healing. It's incredible. In combat, the military calls this 4x4 breathing. 4x4 breathing. So here's what 4x4 breathing is. 4x4 breathing is where you do these things in 4-second increments. 4 seconds each. You inhale deeply through your nose, you hold your breath, you exhale deeply through your mouth, and then you pause. Okay? We'll do this in a second. Let me give you one other story that's just really amazing. I have a grandson, and I told him that I tell this story, and he's okay with me, but he hates me. No, he doesn't hate me. But his name's Tyler. Tyler is like ADHD on steroids and Mountain Dew all at once. I mean, the poor kid, I really feel sorry for him because he has struggled. So he called me one time. This is a few years ago. He was probably about 9 years old. He said, Grandpa, my parents are going great. And he goes on and rattling. I can't really understand him. He's so upset with his parents and he's so mad. And I said, okay. And I try to listen and kind of affirm him. And then I said, okay, Tyler, you want to be in the military, right? He said, yeah. And I'm not necessarily thrilled about it, but he wants to be in the military. And so I said, yeah. I said, if you're going to be in the military, you need to learn to control your emotions. So here's what you need to do, Tyler. You need to learn to calm your emotions, and let me show you how. So I teach him deep breathing. So we do this deep breathing, okay? He says, okay, you know, so we go through the deep breathing, and within about 5 to 10 minutes, he is absolutely calmed down. I know a lady that in Idaho that teaches First Nation people, and they have some real struggles in their classroom sometimes, and she takes these kids aside and does deep breathing. So Tyler's all calmed down. I said, no, Tyler, when you step out away from the phone now and you go back to your parents, they're going to say something, you may get upset again. Just go back to your room and do deep breathing. I asked his mom recently, this year, this is like a couple years later, I said, how's he doing? You know, is he doing okay? Yeah, he doesn't get nearly as bad, but he walks around the house deep breathing a lot. He's doing a lot of deep breathing. Well, his brother Gavin, the one that got hit by the car, Gavin had a heart problem. He had 4 ablations, 4 operations on his heart, 4 procedures. And he was very anxious because he had a life-threatening arrhythmia. I mean, it's like, where does this stuff end? And so Gavin was anxious about this, and a couple years ago I said, hey, Gavin, you know, I think I can help you with your anxiety. How about if I teach you deep breathing? Oh, he said, my brother Tyler already taught me that. It's like, whoa, this is cool. Let's do it right now, okay? But I never usually do this on Sunday morning because people fall asleep in church enough. But anyway, let's get relaxed, all right? So let's do this 4x4 breathing. What we're going to do is inhale deeply through your nose for 4 seconds. And we're going to, let's do it. Inhale deeply through your nose. Hold it for 4 seconds. Now exhale through your mouth. 4 seconds. Don't blow on anybody. And then pause. Let's do it again. Hold it. Nice snoring up front here. Let me give you an idea how you can get bonus points on this. If you do pursed lip breathing, it helps. Especially if you have asthma, it's really good to do pursed lip breathing. Pursed lip breathing is where you blow out with your lips pursed. It opens up your airways. The other thing you can do that will help your vagus nerve, to stimulate your vagus nerve, is when you breathe in, you do what they call abdominal breathing. And your belly needs to be out further than your chest. So you go, you look like a pregnant person, you know. What did we learn in church? How to breathe like a pregnant person. Isn't it great? I told you. Well, anyways, let's keep moving. This, you say, okay, is there a Bible verse for that? Not particularly. But I think what it does is works with the way God created us so magnificently. And it works. Let me give you 2 other tips to turn off the stress response. Before you take a test, by the way, if you're a student, before you take a test, do some deep breathing. Another thing you can do, now you can do deep breathing about anywhere as long as you don't act too weird. But if you can also turn off the stress response by taking a brisk walk. And you take a brisk walk for maybe 30 minutes or so after work or something, or get on the treadmill or something, or get on the elliptical, that really gets that adrenaline worked out, and it helps you do that. Another thing you can actually do that really works is journaling and writing down your thoughts. Anyway, those are some of the things that could be really helpful. So, okay, we've calmed ourselves with deep breathing. Now, what do we do next? Another thing that we need to do, let's go back to our picture of thriving in Jeremiah. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They'll be like a tree planted by the water, sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. It calms its anxiety. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. The other part of this is, how can we deal with worry? My mother loves to worry. I've also got the worry gene. My wife says, "Why do you get so worried?" I don't know, but it worries me. So here's what my mom did. My dad died in 2011. In 2013, my mom had lived by herself in that big house for a while, and it was time to move out. She was 83 years old or 82 years old, and we said, "Mom, it's time to move to Greencroft." And Greencroft is like a big retirement center in our area. She said she was 97 pounds. She's a very sweet lady, but she gathered up her 97 pounds, short little lady, stuck her pouty lip out and said, "Nope, I'm not moving to Greencroft." And I thought, this is going to be a great long summer. All right, how are we going to do this? So she called me a few days later and she said, "Steve, I'm moving to Greencroft." I said, "Mom, I'm coming right over." So I went over to her and I said, "Mom, what happened? You were so dead set against this, and now you're all excited about it." She said, "Steve, I went back in that bedroom and I prayed, and I'm moving to Greencroft." I said, "Mom, we're selling the house, but we're going to keep that bedroom. I got a lot of people I want to send back there." So what happened? My mom was very worried about how this thing would play out. Well, when she went to Greencroft, she'd be away from her friends that she lived next to. She wouldn't be with a familiar setting anymore, blah, 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 all these things. But then she realized one day, there are people at Greencroft. My mom loves people. She had 7 of them. I have 5 brothers and a sister. She loves people. She loves to pray with people, evangelize. She's a tremendous evangelist. And so finally it dawned on her, there are over 1,000 people living at Greencroft. This is going to be fun. So she was all excited. So the day comes when we've got all her stuff in her tiny little apartment, and she's going to go to Greencroft, and my sister-in-law Carol is taking her to Greencroft, and we hear this story later, and Mom turns to Carol and says, "Carol, this is the best day of my life." And I think, "Mom, what about when I was born? I can think of a lot of better days of your life, but now this, moving to Greencroft, the best day of your life?" What had happened between saying, "Nope, I'm not moving to Greencroft," and becoming the best day of her life? She learned to handle her worries, and she learned to turn those things around. In Matthew, remember, stress is a brain's reaction to a perceived threat. Fear is how we feel about a threat. Worry is how we think about it. Matthew 6:34 says, "Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." So how do we apply this scripture? Not to worry. Worry is uncontrolled thinking. Worry is uncontrolled thinking. But you can control your thinking. There was actually, this is crazy to me that they actually believe, 100 years ago, psychologists did not believe you could control your thinking. Your mind was just going on autopilot. But you can control your thinking. And the Bible tells you can. In Philippians 4:8 and 9, look at this. This is amazing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right. Think about things that are pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Keep putting into practice all you learned from me and heard from me and saw me doing, and the God of peace will be with you. So worry is how I think, about the threats in my life. Now, when I was in school getting my master's degree, I had a professor named Dr. Sophauser. She said, Steve, I'm a nursing prof. These students come to me, and they are so depressed, and they're even suicidal. And they tell me, but I can't help the way I feel. And she says, I tell them, no, but you can help the way you think. And if you begin to think differently, you will begin to feel differently. If you begin to think differently, you will begin to feel differently. We live in the feeling of our thinking. Now there's a money line for you. This can change your life. This can change your life. We live in the feeling of our thinking. You know what happens when we experience a threat? When a threat appears on the scene, in a millisecond we tell ourselves a story. A worry story, okay? Worry is a scary story I tell myself. So something comes up. Think about a stress, a threat that you had. There's a story in there. That story is producing a feeling in you. Fear, anxiety, worry, whatever it is. And then that will lead you to a certain action that you may not be happy about in the end. It's really amazing. But you don't have to tell yourself that scary story. So you have an appointment with a doctor, and he says, well, we need to do some more tests. What do? You don't know the answer, but you start filling in the story. Because your brain is trying to resolve a threat. And it's trying to fill in the blank. And you know what it does? It always fills it in horribly. So I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm thinking about Gavin, I'm thinking about Tyler, and I'm thinking about me, and I'm thinking about my doctor appointment, and I have all these worry stories filling my mind. By the way, this is not in the notes but I have here, but let me give you one of the greatest antidotes to worry. The greatest antidotes to worry is gratefulness. Gratefulness. If you are struggling with a worry story, one of the best things you can do is start giving thanks. God, I'm not sure about Tyler. I'm not sure how he's doing. But I thank you for his parents. I thank you for the good influence in his life. I thank you that I have a good relationship with him. I thank you that you care about him. I thank you that he's going to church. I thank you that, and I can begin thanking him for God for anything I can possibly think of. It is impossible to be anxious and worried and grateful at the same time. And here's another thing that science has figured out. Science has figured out that gratitude makes you happy. And that when you even say the word gratitude, there's a part of your brain that lights up. Ding! Just saying gratitude. And science has figured out that if you will give, and this is amazing because it's all over in the Bible, if you will give thanks, just express gratitude for 2 or 3 things a day, it's scientifically proved that you're going to be a happier person in the end, over time. It's an amazing thing, gratitude. Worry is a scary story I tell myself, but I don't have to tell myself that story. What did my mom do? My mom, what she did is, I think about this with the stress deal. My mom's all stressed out about moving to Greencroft. She goes back in that room, she pauses. I don't know if she did some deep breathing or not. She paused, she prayed, she was open to a new story, and God gave her a different ending to that story. Instead of feeling like I'm going to lose my home, I'm going to lose my familiarity, I'm going to lose my friends here in this neighborhood, God says, no, let me write a different story for that, ending for that story. The other day, okay, this is all happening to the Clark family. So Tyler, Gavin, their brothers, their dad's name is Jason. A few months ago, we get a report from the doctor, 6 months ago actually, that he has a cyst in his brain about the size of his fist. He didn't even know he had it. The only way he found out is he started having terrible headaches. And they did an examination on that, and it's like, whoa. Now, they did another exam recently, and they're thinking, well, maybe it's not really pressing on the brain. We don't know if we have to have brain. You may have had this 30 years or 5 years or 6 months. We don't know. So I took that to God, and I woke up at 4 o'clock, and I said, oh, God, now it's Tyler and Gavin, and now it's Jason. What are we going to do about this? And I said, God, what do I do about this worry story? And here's what God told me. He said, let me finish that story. I love God. So I say, okay, God, I'm not going to finish that story. I'm going to let you finish it. So when we're anxious, we calm ourselves with deep breathing, and then we become aware of our thinking, our worry stories. And if you're not sure, ask God to show you. Say, God, what's the worry story that I'm working on right now? What am I scaring myself to death over? How am my brain's trying to resolve this problem that I can't resolve. But I want to take that to you, and I want to tell a different story. Let me tell you real quickly, and I can send you my notes on this if you want to, how to rewrite your worry story. That's brought to you by the letter W that I have a hard time saying. How to rewrite your worry story, okay? Don't believe everything you think. Do not believe everything you think. We have a profound ability to believe wrong things at a very deep level. So don't believe everything you think. Question does it line up with the Bible? Is it true? 85% of our worries never happen. It's the 15% that has me worried. Secondly, challenge your wrong thinking about God's word and facts. So not only do you say, okay, I'm not going to believe anything, but if this is not, I'm going to challenge this. I'm going to challenge this wrong. Sow seeds of doubt into the wrong things that you believe. Allow others to talk with you. I think that's in here too. Verse number 3. Talk it out with someone and say, am I thinking about this inaccurately? Pray. Come up with a better ending to your story. And then do something to get a better ending. Okay? So I've actually asked people sometimes to sit down, write your worry story, now rewrite it. Rewrite your worry story. And say, God, how can I write this in a way that's going to leave room for you to do something and express gratitude? Let me just finish with these thoughts. William James says the greatest weapons against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. That's just like what Philippians says. Think about these things, think about these things, think about these things. The greatest weapon against stress is to choose one thought over another. Lisa Tam said, if you can change your thoughts, you can change your life. But the Apostle Paul, what God said in the Word, in Romans 12:2, you know that one, be transformed by the renewing of your mind? Here in the other translation it says, let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Wow. Let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. God, would you please help me to understand and identify how I'm thinking that is only producing more stress for me and other people, that is reacting to these threats in all the wrong ways, and help me to change my thinking. So when we're stressed, we calm ourselves with deep thinking, or with deep breathing, we control our thinking, we rewrite our worry stories, we express gratitude. And I'll just finish with one other one. Years ago, when they started studying stress and resilience, they studied households, and they saw disadvantaged homes, really troubled homes. And they saw two kids coming out of the same home. One child was resilient and one was not. And they thought, wow, that's really weird. They're both experiencing the same thing, but one's resilient, one isn't. And so they said, oh, it must be their personalities. Well, maybe a little bit. But one of the things that they found was the most helpful to them was where they had a significant adult in their life who they trusted and from whom they could draw strength. When you're stressed, find the people in your church, or in your small group, or maybe even your family. I think Tyler's doing this from me as his grandpa, where there's a person, and I think God puts these people in our lives, and we need to identify them. God, who can I go to that I can talk over my difficulties? My wife's dad was that way. Herb Moss was one of the most loving father figures in Elkhart County. And when he died at 82 years of age a few years ago, 800 people came to his funeral. And one after another lined up and told my wife, thank you for loaning me your dad. And I tell her today, Rhonda, I love you, but I married you for your dad. Because he was that trustworthy figure in my life when I didn't have one, who I could draw strength from. And God places those people in our lives to give us what we need. And they have found that with children, the difference between making it or not is often that one significant adult that helps them with that. We have a powerful opportunity with children that we see around us of just being that significant person. So I want to encourage you in these things. Let's just take a moment to pray as we finish up. God, thank you so much for the amazing way that you created us and how we can work with you to manage our stress better. Thank you that we don't have to simply react, but by the Spirit of God and by following your word and some simple little natural things you've given us to do, we can do some things that will calm our nerves and cheer us up. We thank you that you are so gracious. Thank you for the way you created us. Thank you for your word that is true. Help us to know how to apply it. I pray for people here tonight that are looking for help and hope, that you would really help them. Lord, if people are even chemically depressed, that you would give them a supernatural healing that would restore the chemicals in their bodies. But Lord, in the other areas where we encounter stress every day, we pray that you'll help us to get better at managing it in a way that would honor you and bring peace and joy to our souls. In Jesus' name, amen.